Are there currents in the cave?
Are the bones soft and rubbery? No. Are there currents in the cave? Not so as you'd notice.
So the bones are bones, not fossils.
The bones are, thank you. The bones are bioapatite and calcium carbonate that has been precipitated into them. They are in effect fossils.
Jim, the second part of that question about currents, are there currents in the cave?
No. No. There's an ever so slight current in the tunnel above, and when there's a heavy rain, there's some significant flow that divers notice and comment on. In the cave itself, no. Just vaguely. It appears that when there was a pool of water down there, there was flow from the west to the east. And so Naya comes in, her legs drop. When bodies decompose in water, they drop in, they sink to the bottom, they start forming gases of decomposition, they float to the surface. That's when they're found usually. And then they begin to decompose and parts fall out. Heavy pieces fall off, and they fall off usually in articulated segments. And so we have the legs and pelvis in one place, we have two arms here, we've got the skull because they float last out here, and a couple of ribs farther off to the side. It appears to have been flowing to the east from the west. So, and that's consistent with other animals too. We seem to have that same flow direction. And since our Ishbalam entrance is to the east, it's apparent that they didn't float in. They actually fell into that cave, died there, decomposed way down deep, below 43 meters. And by the way, sea level overrode 43 meters really about 10,000 years ago, was about the time when it overrode it. Yes.
I am assuming that all of that water in there is salt water?
Nope.
No, it's fresh water?
It's fresh water down to 70 feet, and it's salt water below that. And there's a halocline, there's sort of a mixed zone in between. The more acidic zone is the mixed zone. Otherwise, it's neutral.
Okay, then
She was in salt water, that's why we had to desalinize her.
Okay, then were there crab and things like that in there with her?
No. No, this does not communicate with the coast in any significant way.
Okay.
There's no saltwater communication. It's all fresh water, so fresh water flows into the Gulf up in the upper tunnels, but there's no lower flow direction. There are some animals that live in the cave. There's some little bitty shrimps that live in there. There are catfish and a little cichlid fish of some kind. Of course, there are bats that fly in and out and drop fruit seeds and stuff like that, but no fauna otherwise. So this is a very, very stable environment. Once things fell, you can see the articulated limbs I showed you. Once they fell, they stayed there. Yeah, Dave?
Was there anything in the humate horizon around the circumference of the cave, in the wall, that contributes towards dating in any way?
Well, the issue with the tropical environments of Yucatan is it doesn't have any soil. It has duff and rock. And the duff decomposes very fast, and those humates from the decomposed duff flow right down into the bottom. So whenever it rains heavily, you get tea. And so that's, I think, what's staining the walls down deep is the tea from the heavy rains. Yes?
Those elephants, did they come a long ways down those caves for some reason?
They came, well, what we suspect is that during the deglaciation, and this is mostly happening during deglaciation, full glacial and deglaciation, during all that, because Yucatan is a sponge, when you lower, it's just riddled with these openings and tunnels, and it's like open plumbing all the way to the sea. There are no flowing streams in the Yucatan Peninsula. The nearest one is over in Chiapa. So there are no creeks or rivers because there's no surface water. So when you go in, I mean, there's inlets and stuff, but there's no real creeks. When you go in, when you lower the water level with the development of large glaciers on the land, they pull water out of the sea and lower the sea level extensively, over 100 meters lower. When you do that, you drain all the water out of Yucatan. So these animals aren't going to have very much water available to them. Right now the water is pretty readily accessible. Fresh water is only a few feet down. But back then it wasn't. And so they were probably being, unless there are some pools of water from the last rain still sitting around, there's no place to get and drink the water. So we think that the gomphotheres, at least, probably the tapirs and peccaries also were drawn, or at least peckers, that papers were drawn in by the smell of water. Remember, most of these animals we're looking at probably aren't real long on eyesight, or they have real good dark sight, dark environment sight. Cats, bears, they live in caves. Cougars in caves, bears in caves. Shasta ground sloths are known to have been in caves. So some of those animals just lived in there and they got lost and fell in the wrong place. There's a lot of different reasons.
I've been there and seen several of these cenotes, these limestone holes in the ground.
Right.
And what I wondered, as you looked at this, as I looked at your pictures, I would think most animals would probably realize that I thought when I stood close to the edge of one, there's no getting out of this place.
Well,
would they have looked a little different 12,000 years ago?
The thing about the surface cenotes are one thing. You've got lights, you can see what's going on. But in that complete darkness of those caves, there is zero light in there. And so a lot of the animals that use caves follow scent trails. And if you're following a scent trail and all of a sudden the floor drops out, you can't smell the floor drop out, you just smell the water you want. Bye-bye. So they probably mostly died on impact. So.
What are the plans now for the near future and long range, 10, 15, 20 years?
Well, it's always a struggle with things like this. First of all, we need to find money. We have some funding from National Geographic, but it isn't very much. It covers some travel expenses and some food and the gas for the divers. So most of our research has been done, or scientific work has been done by volunteers, or voluntarily, with the presumption that you're going to get a paper out of it for your career, right? Well, that's turned into a little bit of a problem occasionally. So we're trying to get some money to pay for some of those dates and things like that, so we don't have to deal with the egos. But, because that's a pain. But we need funding. But the key things, this has a lot of potential to understand the latest Pleistocene and terminal and deglacial, or sort of terminal Pleistocene, paleoclimate, vegetation, animal communities, and human. So it's got just about whatever you'd want. And so we've got geochemists working with us. We've got a paleobotanist working with us. There are like 4 of us who are working on paleontology. And then I'm working with 2 Mexican scholars on the human. So we have people working on it. The 4 things that are the most important for us right now are to get the rest of Naya out. Because all the rest of her bones, all their 47 pieces that we've identified so far, are still there. All that I haven't been able to find are the bones and hands and feet, and they're not particularly earth-shakingly important to find them. And we probably never will, because they're so small the divers won't see them. So we need to get the rest of Naya out, that's number 1. Then there are 4 animals that are important. We have a new species of giant ground sloth. We want to get some of that out and get that individual named and in the record, and determine how old it is. There are research questions about pumas. Pumas were extinct in North America during the Pleistocene, and they returned only at the end of the last glaciation in North America, probably after the other big cats died out. So I want to look at the genetics and age of the 3 pumas that are in there, because that may help answer the questions about that. There's that. The dog. I want the dog very badly. I want to know how old the dog is if we get genetics out of the dog. And so we've got and then the bears. That may be a new species of bear, and gosh, we've got at least 6 of them. So there's lots and lots of potential there. So those are the main things, that and dating the rest of the animals to find out if in fact any of them are coeval with Naya, because I sure would like to see that be the case. I would just love it to have those saber-toothed tigers be their age. I can show that picture all the time.
So you mentioned that other divers went down there and touched the bones and broke them?
Yeah, we've had people go down and kind of mess around a little bit. They're not, nobody's taken anything so far, knock on wood. But I'm worried about the saber-toothed tiger skull. Not because it's such a big deal, because there's lots and lots of them in the record, but it's got the teeth in it. I can't date non-enamel. So, but they go down, and they're tour guides. People come from all over the world today to dive the caves of Contender Road. And there are people, locals, who make their living off guiding them in there. So they're going to go in there, take them in, and then they want to take pictures with the specimens, and so they'll pick one up. Or they're not very skilled divers, and they lose their buoyancy control, and they put their hand down, and they break something. That's what it looks like happened with these. Somebody put their hand down in the wrong place and broke 3 bones. So we need to get the most important things out, and at least studied before putting them back and letting them take their chances. But we will never take out the ganthethere. We won't take out the shafted ground sloths. They're well known. We don't need those. So a lot of those bones can just, tapers. I'd like to find out how old they are, but other than that, there's no particular importance to them. So a lot of that will stay in place. Yeah.
What's the stance of local and national authorities there?
The symbol that I had on my title slide was for the National Institute of Anthropology and History, ENOH. We are an ENOH project. We not only are licensed by ENOH to do this work, the lead of the whole project is the head of underwater archaeology for the nation of Mexico. So it's a Mexican project with Canadians and Americans working on it. Yeah.
Pretty good chance of finding more human remains.
More human remains in there?
I mean, it seems like
Is there a good chance of it? I doubt it.
huge network.
If they're there, they're underneath the back guano, and it's going to be unlikely we'd ever get down below all that stuff.
So this is pretty unique,
Yes,
pretty important.
yes.
It sounds to me like because the situation is so different, that you have actually probably developed new methods for doing this particular kind of work.
Right, we have. It's been necessary to make new way, and that's what makes it so much fun. That's the interesting part. That's the exciting thing, is solving the problems.
Will all this be in a book?
Mhm. Yeah.
And you will bring the book here, right?
Yeah. Yeah, assuming I'm still around to do it. I don't know, it's going to be a long project. But the photographers, you can see, photographers we have working with us, there are 2 photographers took most of those pictures, and these guys are really good at what they're doing. One of them is better at National Geographic style photographs with people in them. It's really good dive pictures, diver in a way, like you're reaching down to something. That's that guy. The other guy does real good still shots of the fossils and things. So it's working out very well, and they all want to see something done with this. So it's been a pretty good deal. The only issues are cave divers are all alpha males, and so are the women, according to Susan. That's what Susan said. Cave divers are alpha males, and so are the women. And it's true. It's a little bit. It's a little bit of kid glove handling, actually more like tiger taming a lot of the time. And of course, scientists have their egos too, so it's a juggling act. And I've got a guy that's a real good diplomat working with me on it too, who just wouldn't hurt anyone's feelings if he could possibly ever help it. So he's working out well too. Yeah.
There are plans for a symposium at the SAA?
Yes, symposium of this next SAA in San Francisco. Yeah. I still have to write my abstract, but yes.
Will a number of the individuals from Mexico come out for that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're going to have the paleontologists. The other 2 physical anthropologists will be there with their students, because their students are doing the papers on the teeth and the taphonomy.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think there are like 10 papers, I think, lined up for it. The bear expert from Tennessee is going to be working on the bears.
Like a half day or a whole day?
No, it'll be probably a half of a half day. 10 papers at 15 minutes apiece is only a short time. So.
Hope they can just leave room.
Now, hopefully have decent abstracts that might draw people in.
Does National Geographic have a continuing interest in this?
Well, National Geographic is actually going to be talking about Hoyo Negro as one of the 3 or 4 cases it's discussing about the first Americans in its January 2015 issue. Also, a lot of our work, the facial reconstruction work, the recovery of the skeletal remains and other things were filmed for NOVA. So National Geographic is doing a NOVA film on Hoyo Negro. Strictly on Hoyo Negro, nothing else. So that's good. So, and we had an article in Science bats in May on the dating and the DNA. Okay? Oh, Mason. Yeah.
So you said that the you described the guano on the bottom of the cave, kind of like a treasure or like a.
Yeah.
So have you sampled any of that? Or?
We have sampled some of it. We've got some just pieces from the very top of the guano piles to get an idea when the guano piles stopped forming. And they all stopped forming just a little while before 10,000 years ago. So that's when the bats could no longer reach their roosts. They got flooded out. But on the bottom of those, we can see through the sequence of development of these. We can date the individual seeds, and then we can look at the stratigraphic change in the kinds of plants that are there. So we can look at the ecosystem changing as the climate shifts in the deglacial period. So that's going to be really interesting. But I think the oldest date we have in guano so far is only 11,500 years, and so they may be pretty young.
Were all the skull and all the ones from the picture, they looked like they were exposed, but originally, did someone have to?
They are as they were found.
So they were just there?
Yep.
And are the bones, most of them encased in the limestone, are they sort of concreted in?
They lie on the limestone.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. One giant ground sloth is largely covered with flowstone, and one coyote skull is covered with flowstone, and that's about it. So they're almost all exposed. I wish there were more pieces with flowstone on them because they can give me the limiting ages. I can get green thoriate the flowstone. But most of them it's going to be really hard, so I have to use back guano as the minimum age, and I have to use the tooth enamel as the maximum, or bone as the maximum age.
I have another question. Can you tell us something about the tooth? It's the shovel, what's the term?
Shovel-shaped incisor.
Yeah, which is what Native Americans have. How is it different from modern Native Americans, and is it like any Asian population?
Well,
Present day.
all human populations today have shovel-shaped incisors to some degree. Some members of the population do. It's just higher percentage in Native America than anyplace else. It's almost uniform. It's almost fixed for shovel-shaped incisors in the Americas. And that's also common in East Asian populations. But they also are what's called double shoveled. They have buttresses. A shoveled incisor has a buttress on either side of the lingual, the tongue side of the tooth, either edge. You can think of it as a buttress. Double shoveled have a buttress on the front too. So they're kind of I-beam shaped. Native Americans have a high frequency of double shoveled incisors. Her incisors are not double shoveled at all. They're flat on the front. But she also has two rooted upper first premolars, which is a characteristic that is not common to those populations. She lacks, as seen as a three-rooted lower first molar, which again is not common to those populations. She has her third molars intact and normal size, same size as the seconds, which those populations tend not to have. So she has a lot of characteristics that are not common to East Asians and Native Americans in her teeth.
You obviously think a lot about what she was like and so forth. You probably thought through too. I mean, you talked about where she may have entered or come in.
Yeah.
Have you thought about, I mean, she must have had lighting or a torch or something. It's that dark.
Well, I would imagine she at least had a torch to start with.
Yeah.
So you can imagine maybe the torch went out.
Any thoughts as to why she would be going so far into it?
Water.
With a lighter.
Water's a possibility. The divers think they've seen rope marks, grooves made by drawing ropes up and down. The problem is they're on the shallow side of the cave where the water wasn't when she died. And they're probably not rope marks at all, but I'm trying to get cave diving skilled enough to go in, or certified enough that the lead diver will let me come in. He's in charge of the diving. And go look at those rope marks, because it's only 200 feet from the entrance, so it's barely beyond the cavern dive. And it's only 40 feet deep, so it's shallow. But I don't think they are. But she may have been going for water. She may have been in there for, it's possible she was pregnant and went in there looking for clay to eat. Pregnant females will often eat clay to get proper minerals. And there was a possibility with her. She's got osteoporosis as a young woman. She's got multiple cavities. She lost 2 teeth up and 2 teeth down recently. What's the fourth characteristic? There are 4 things she has that are consistent with pregnancy. Anyway, so there's a possibility that that was what was going on with it. No? Stretching?
Can you comment at all?
Her dog in there?
I'm gonna get the one behind you and I'll come back to you.
Hey, any chance you followed her dog in there?
That's why I want to take the dog. Go ahead.
Is there any possibility of restricting access to Oyonnaga?
We have been talking about that. We did have Mexican Marines guarding the entrances for a while, but they kind of dribbled off. We've got a construction fence barrier from the nearest entrance, but between the first and second times out there, someone cut through it and went in. It's been restitched and not opened yet again. Come diving season in November, they'll probably start slicing their way through it again. And someone had been in the cave from a different entrance and moved another one of the bears, shifted it a little bit to get a better picture of it. And that's the problem. They move them, they get stuff off the surface of them, and I can't get the minimum age off the guano that's covering them. So I'm going, that one bear that's covered with guano, that one we get next. Because I don't want to lose that possibility.
Is the cast of her skull still in there?
We put a replacement skull in there. Some of the pictures you saw actually had a bone clones, quote, Asian female skull, which I don't think is. But anyway, in there to make people think it's still there so they don't. Our divers are real worried about folks coming, their fellow divers complaining on the internet and griping about it. The fact that these things have changed, and we're going. Then you ask them why they're in where they're not supposed to be, because their great big sign says "Do not enter" on the, in the cave tunnels, either side of the Oyonnaga. But they're all worried about what other people think of them, so we put a plastic skull down there, but it's not back there now. We let it out because they're not supposed to be in there. If somebody starts complaining, we'll just trace where they came from.
Can you comment any further on the relationship between this young lady and Kennewick Man?
Nope.
Jim, just thinking about planning field work and wondering what the complexity is in terms of time frames that one of those guys will take. I know those are really complicated procedures, so just wondering how long does it take to do one of those dives? And
How long does the dive take?
Yeah, how long can those guys stay down?
Counting planning?
Yeah.
A couple months. In reality, 4 hours.
Okay.
Actually, like 4 or 5 days, 4 hours at a time.
Okay.
Yeah. But this last one where we had to recover her, we took an awful lot of planning. Had to devise the things to recover her and to keep the skull and the mandibles stable so they wouldn't shake around on that really rough road on the way out. And we had to make sure the water didn't get in because it would create a water hammer effect, the water sloshing back and forth and beat the skull to death that way. So it couldn't do that. So I had to seal off, be completely watertight, or airtight in that case. And it had to hold it in place without putting pressure on it. And the minimum number of movable parts, because the divers don't think too clearly at 130 feet below surface. And you need to make it as simple as possible to avoid failure. So they were a total of, including, not counting the lids, the skull box had 1 part, and the mandible had 2. So it was just